Ever thought a single night could flip your entire world upside down? Watch how a waiter's brutally honest attitude toward Snoop Dogg turned an ordinary evening into a wild ride of unexpected twists. You won't believe what happened next. Don't miss out. Subscribe, like, and drop your thoughts in the comments to dive into this unbelievable story. A waiter insulted Snoop Dogg at a high-end restaurant, but when the truth came out, everything changed. The rain gently tapped against the windows of Harmony Haven, a refined yet discreet restaurant nestled in the heart of Los Angeles. With its cream-colored walls, soft ambient lighting, and the rich aroma of fresh-baked bread blending with melted butter and herbs, it was the perfect escape from the relentless city buzz. Snoop Dogg ran a tired hand over his face, trying to shake off the exhaustion from sleepless nights spent working on his latest album and business ventures. His phone buzzed in his pocket again, but for the first time that day, he chose to ignore it. "Just one night," he murmured, pushing open the heavy wooden door. One night without being Snoop Dogg. The hostess, Laura, barely glanced up from her reservation book. With her immaculate blonde bun and polished demeanor, she was used to reading guests at a glance. His black sweater, worn and faded, along with his old jeans, didn't match the profile of their typical clientele. "Table for one?" she asked, flipping the pages lazily. "Yeah, something away from the windows," he answered, grateful she didn't recognize him. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Diego Martinez was polishing a wine glass while his coworkers vented their frustrations. At 35, Diego had spent nearly half his life in restaurants, with the last 5 years at Harmony Haven being particularly draining. "Did you see the guy who just walked in?" Sophia, a waitress, scoffed as she grabbed an order. "Looks like he got lost on his way to McDonald's." Diego peeked through the kitchen door. "Table 15? That's my section." "Great. Another one here to take up a table for 2 hours and order a salad with tap water." It had already been a rough night. His mother had called, needing yet another expensive treatment that insurance refused to cover, and his younger sister was relying on him to pay for college. The weight of it all pressed down on him as he adjusted his black apron. "Chef's in a terrible mood," Carlos, another waiter, muttered as he walked in. "Someone trashed his filet on Yelp." Diego exhaled and walked toward table 15, forcing a professional smile despite feeling like his world was caving in. As he reached the table, he noticed the customer's slouched posture, the weary eyes, something familiar about that kind of exhaustion. "Good evening," Diego's voice cut through Snoop's thoughts. "I'm Diego. I'll be your waiter tonight. Can I get you something to drink while you look over the menu?" Snoop barely looked up from his phone, where yet another negative headline flashed on the screen. "Whiskey, neat. Whatever you've got." Diego narrowed his eyes slightly. Harmony Haven was known for its fine wines and gourmet French cuisine, not for pouring whiskey like some dive bar. "We have Macallan 18 year, $145 a shot," he said, with a tone that suggested this particular customer might want to reconsider. "That's fine," Snoop murmured, eyes still on his phone. Diego turned on his heel, muttering under his breath about customers who didn't even appreciate where they were. At the bar, Sophia smirked as she stirred a martini. "Your table 15 seems fascinating," she teased. "He could at least pretend he knows where he is," Diego huffed. "Did you see how he's dressed? This isn't Denny's." Back at the table, Snoop noticed the glances and whispers from the staff. He almost found it amusing. After weeks of being surrounded by fake admiration and people desperate to impress him, there was something oddly refreshing about being treated like a nobody. The restaurant filled up around him. A couple celebrating their anniversary took the table next to his, the man in a perfectly tailored suit, the woman in a dress that likely cost more than Diego's car. Across the room, a group of entertainment executives animatedly discussed their latest project. Diego returned, setting the whiskey down with slightly less care than necessary, a few drops splashing onto the pristine tablecloth. "Are you ready to order?" he asked, tapping his pen against his notepad. Snoop closed the menu. "What do you recommend?" Diego sighed, barely masking his irritation. Everything on our menu is excellent, he said flatly. But maybe you'd like to start with something simple, like the soup of the day. It's more accessible. Accessible. Snoop raised an eyebrow, intrigued by the waiter's barely veiled audacity. Yeah, Diego continued, table 15 heirs usually go for that. And just like that, the night took a turn no one saw coming. The lobster is market price, which today is significantly higher. Diego spoke as if explaining to a child, his tone laced with quiet condescension. Snoop's phone lit up with another notification, another issue with his label. He ignored it, oddly entertained by the waiter's attitude. I'll have the foie gras to start, Snoop said, pronouncing it in a way that made Diego visibly wince, followed by, and the filet mignon, medium rare. Diego hesitated for just a second before blurting out, are you sure? Foie gras is quite sophisticated. It's not for everyone's palate. At the next table, the anniversary couple exchanged uncomfortable glances. The waiter's attitude was bordering on outright rude, but Snoop seemed almost amused. I'm sure, Snoop replied simply. And a bottle of wine. What do you recommend? Diego glanced at Snoop's worn sweater, then at the wine list. We have a pretty basic Merlot for $50, he said, dragging out the words. Probably more, suitable for your budget. Snoop barely looked up. Bring me the Chateau Lafite Rothschild 2010. Diego felt his throat go dry. Sir, that bottle costs $2,500. Perhaps you should. The bottle will be fine, Snoop cut him off, turning back to his phone. Diego walked away, shaking his head. Another one trying to be what he's not, he muttered under his breath. Back in the kitchen, he shared the scene with his coworkers. I bet his card gets declined, Sophia laughed. Remember that guy last month who tried to impress his date and ended up washing dishes? As the night progressed, Diego grew bolder. When Snoop mispronounced Bordeaux, Diego corrected him with thinly veiled disdain. When he asked for ketchup for his $120 steak, Diego practically had to restrain himself from rolling his eyes. You know, Diego said while clearing the dessert plate, voice dripping with sarcasm, next time, there's a lovely little place nearby called Burger King. I think you'd feel more comfortable there. The diners at nearby tables went silent, expecting an explosion of anger that never came. Instead, Snoop gave a small smile and pulled out his phone, seemingly recording something. Outside, the rain had picked up, the occasional crack of thunder adding a dramatic backdrop to the scene that was about to unfold. Diego had no idea his life was about to take a radical turn. For now, he was just another grumpy waiter, trying to survive another night, oblivious to the fact that this would become one of the most legendary stories Harmony Haven had ever seen. As the night neared its end, Diego prepared the bill, his anticipation laced with quiet disdain. The total? Over $3,000. He was certain this would turn into an awkward moment. As he walked toward table 15, mentally rehearsing how he'd handle the inevitable card decline, Snoop called out. Excuse me, he said, just as Diego passed by with a tray of desserts. Could you bring me another whiskey? Diego let out an exaggerated sigh. Are you sure you wouldn't prefer a glass of water? It's on the house. At a neighboring table, an executive nearly choked on her wine. Her dining companion gave her a look, a mix of amusement and second-hand embarrassment. The whiskey will be fine, Snoop replied smoothly, now thoroughly enjoying the moment. It had been months since someone had spoken to him without either flattery or fear. In the kitchen, Sophia intercepted Diego as he poured the whiskey. Don't you think you're pushing it, she whispered, though there was more admiration than concern in her voice. Jules is gonna kill you if he hears how you're talking to customers. Diego smirked. Did you see how he holds his utensils? Like he's never eaten in a place like this before. And the foie gras? He only ordered it to show off. He doesn't even know how to appreciate it. Even so, Sophia bit her lip. There's something about him, feels familiar. Yeah, Diego scoffed. He looks like every wannabe artist who comes in here pretending to be the next big thing. I'm sure he's got a revolutionary album sitting in his garage. Meanwhile, from the kitchen doorway, Chef Jules had discreetly peeked out at table 15. His face twisted between professional indignation at the ketchup request and barely concealed curiosity. "Sacre bleu," he muttered. "How does someone order Chateau Lafite and then pair it with ketchup? C'est un crime." From across the room, the restaurant manager, Thomas, had been watching everything. Something about the man at table 15 made him uneasy, like he was missing something obvious. "Good evening, sir," Thomas said with a practiced smile, his professional demeanor unwavering. "Is everything to your liking?" Snoop looked up from his phone, his eyes gleaming with amusement. "Everything's excellent. Especially the service, it has a unique touch." Thomas noted the subtle smirk and felt his unease deepen. There was something off about this interaction, but he couldn't quite place it. "I'm glad to hear that. If there's anything else you need." "Actually," Snoop interrupted, "could you have the chocolate souffle prepared? I noticed it takes about 20 minutes. At that moment, Diego arrived with the whiskey. "The souffle is quite sophisticated," he said, completely ignoring the warning glance Thomas shot his way. "Perhaps ice cream would be more appropriate for your palate?" Thomas held his breath, waiting for a complaint that never came. Instead, the customer simply smiled. "The souffle will be fine," Snoop said, his voice smooth. "And maybe you could explain to me what makes it so sophisticated?" For the first time that evening, Diego hesitated. The man's calm, unwavering demeanor was beginning to unsettle him. At the anniversary table nearby, the husband leaned in toward his wife. "That guy must be someone important. No one stays this calm under such terrible service unless they're used to handling much worse." His wife nodded subtly, watching table 15 with newfound curiosity. "It's the way he carries himself. The way he observes everything. He's not just some regular diner." Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the windows fogged up, casting a dim glow over the nearly empty restaurant. The intimate atmosphere made every exchange feel amplified, every glance more scrutinized. At the bar, Sophia discreetly watched as Diego prepared the bill, his usual blend of anticipation and quiet satisfaction returning. $3,478.50. More than what he made in a month. As he walked toward table 15, Diego mentally replayed every moment from the night, every sarcastic remark, every condescending look. "If you need me to explain the numbers," Diego started, placing the bill on the table with just a hint of smugness. "That won't be necessary," Snoop interrupted, reaching into his worn wallet and sliding out a card. A black card. For a split second, Diego just stared. It wasn't a standard credit card, it was heavier, sleek, minimalist. A moment of recognition flickered in his mind. But that realization would have to wait, because at that moment, Diego was still just a waiter who had spent the entire evening belittling someone without the slightest idea of what was coming next. The shift in atmosphere. The restaurant, now nearly empty, felt different. The tension wasn't aggressive, but something had changed, something was building. Diego, still holding the iPad displaying the digital wine list, forced a smirk. "Would you like to see the wine list again?" he asked, his voice thick with irony. "I can show you the wines by the glass, they're a bit more manageable." Snoop nodded, his expression unreadable. "Why don't you surprise me?" he said. "Something that pairs well with the souffle." That response, too calm, too composed, threw Diego off balance. He had expected a defensive reaction, maybe even an outburst, but instead, Snoop was just watching. At the bar, Sophia polished glasses, her curiosity growing. "Diego," she whispered as he approached. "Doesn't this seem off to you? He's way too calm about all this." "Probably doesn't even realize I'm insulting him," Diego muttered, grabbing a bottle of Sauternes, the classic pairing for chocolate souffle. A perfect selection, but the way he chose it had a trace of malice. "These entertainment types live in their own little bubbles," he added dismissively. The observation. In the kitchen, Chef Jules grumbled in rapid French as he carefully prepared the soufflé. Customers like this don't appreciate haute cuisine. Mon Dieu. Meanwhile, Thomas, still observing from across the room, couldn't shake the feeling that something big was unfolding before his eyes, something he was missing. Back at the table, Diego returned with a glass of golden wine, placing it down with practiced precision. A Chateau d'Yquem, he said, watching for a reaction. Though you might find its flavor a bit complex. Snoop picked up the glass, tilting it slightly, inspecting the liquid with genuine interest. Interesting choice, he mused. What made you pick a Sauternes? The way he said it, the precise pronunciation, the way he emphasized the region, made Diego pause for just a fraction of a second. He quickly recovered. It's the traditional pairing for soufflé, he said coolly, slipping back into his condescending tone. Though I suppose you prefer a Coca-Cola. At a nearby table, a group of entertainment executives who had been silently watching the interaction for over an hour exchanged knowing glances. One of them discreetly pulled out his phone and started typing something. Over at the bar, an executive called out, "Sophia." She turned. Is that waiter always like this with customers? Sophia, still wiping down the bar, hesitated. Diego is usually very professional, she admitted. Something about this guy has him acting especially inspired tonight. The setup. Meanwhile, at table 15, Snoop's phone vibrated with multiple social media notifications about the latest controversies surrounding his label. He ignored them. Instead, he casually opened his phone's voice recording app. Mind if I record some work notes? He asked as Diego returned to check on the soufflé. The atmosphere here is inspiring. Diego scoffed. Oh, are you working on the next big album? He said, voice dripping with sarcasm. Another revolutionary track? Or maybe something in cannabis? Snoop suppressed a smile as he adjusted his phone. Something like that, he said. And that's when it started. The moment of realization. Chef Jules was carefully putting the final touches on the soufflé when Thomas approached, his face lined with concern. Jules, he said in a hushed tone, does the customer at table 15 look familiar to you? The chef glanced through the kitchen window, studying the man sitting casually at his table. His brow furrowed. There's something about him, he muttered. But it can't be who I'm thinking of. That guy wouldn't come alone, and dressed like that? Before the conversation could continue, Diego strode into the kitchen, adjusting his apron as he grabbed the plated soufflé. What are you two staring at? He asked, barely masking his irritation. Thomas hesitated. Diego, have you noticed anything particular about the customer at table 15? Diego scoffed. Other than his complete lack of class and his little performance of pretending to be sophisticated? He lifted the plate with an exaggerated flourish. He's your typical Hollywood wannabe who thinks he can buy refinement with a black card. Thomas opened his mouth to say more, but Diego had already turned, making his way back toward the dining room. On his way, he brushed past Sophia, who reached out to stop him. Diego, wait, she whispered urgently. One of the executives at table 6 just showed me something on his phone. I really think you should. Not now, Sophia, Diego interrupted, barely sparing her a glance. I need to serve this soufflé before it deflates. The last straw. At table 15, Snoop glanced up as Diego arrived, placing the dessert down with theatrical arrogance. Your soufflé, sir, Diego announced. Do you need me to explain how to eat it? It's a bit more sophisticated than a Starbucks brownie. Snoop, who had been subtly adjusting his phone's position on the table, tilted it slightly to capture the moment. Please, he said smoothly, enlighten me. I'm always eager to learn. Once again, there was no anger, no irritation, just that same unreadable amusement. At the bar, Sophia was breathing heavily, struggling to process what she had just seen on the executive's phone. Thomas noticed her expression and quickly approached. Sophia, are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost. Her eyes flicked toward table 15. "Thomas," she whispered, "do you know who that is?" Before he could answer, Diego returned, shaking his head in disbelief. "Can you believe this guy just asked me about the physics of why a soufflé rises?" Diego scoffed. "Like he actually cares about the science behind it." "Diego," Sophia tried again, more urgently this time. But Diego had already turned away, responding to a subtle hand gesture from Snoop requesting more wine. On his way to the bar, Diego glanced at his phone for the first time that evening. 3 unread messages from his sister. "Diego, are you watching the news? Answer me. This is important. Please tell me you're not being yourself tonight." He rolled his eyes, assuming it was just family drama, and slipped the phone back into his pocket. He had more important things to do, like proving a point. The final blow. As he returned to Snoop's table, Diego poured the wine, his smirk unwavering. "You know," he said, "it's refreshing to see someone pretend to be this interested in gastronomy. Most entertainment guys who come in here just want to show off how much they can spend." Snoop took a slow sip of his wine, watching Diego over the rim of his glass. "And what makes you so sure I'm pretending?" Diego let out a short, condescending chuckle. "Oh, please. I've been in this business for 15 years. I can tell the difference between someone who genuinely appreciates fine dining and someone who's just trying to keep up appearances." His voice dripped with confidence. "The way you hold your utensils. How you pronounce French names. The fact that you asked for ketchup with a prime steak. It all screams new money trying to fit in." At nearby tables, diners sat in stunned silence, torn between disbelief and a morbid fascination with what they were witnessing. The group of executives who had been watching the exchange for over an hour had officially stopped pretending not to listen. One of them discreetly raised his phone and began recording. Snoop leaned back slightly, adjusting his phone on the table once more. 15 years is a long time, he mused. "You must have seen all kinds of customers." "Oh, absolutely," Diego said, completely oblivious to the shift in atmosphere. Sophia, from across the room, was practically waving at him now, but he didn't see her. "But you entertainment guys?" Diego continued with a smirk. "You're my favorite category. Always so sure you're changing the world with your music and cannabis ventures." Snoop tilted his head, genuinely intrigued. Diego had no idea he was standing at the edge of the biggest lesson of his life. The turning point. Diego let out a sharp, mocking laugh, shaking his head. "The music industry," he scoffed. "Like the rap scene? Please. Snoop Dogg is just another celebrity playing the legend card. At least he knows how to dress appropriately for dinner, unlike." His words trailed off. Something shifted. The amused expression on his customer's face. The way he had casually mentioned Snoop Dogg's name. The phone, sitting on the table, recording. A chill ran down Diego's spine. At the bar, Sophia had buried her face in her hands. She couldn't watch anymore. Thomas had started walking toward table 15, but seeing Diego's expression, seeing him finally putting the pieces together, he stopped. For a long second, Diego stood frozen. His mouth opened, but no words came out. He swallowed hard, his mind replaying every sarcastic comment, every dismissive glance, every condescending remark. "Excuse me, sir, but you're not. But that realization, that moment of horrifying understanding, would have to wait. For now, Diego was just standing there, drowning in the weight of his own arrogance. The silence before the storm. The restaurant was eerily quiet. The few remaining diners had stopped even pretending not to watch. The group of executives had all placed their phones on the table, recording every second. Even Chef Jules had abandoned his kitchen post, peeking through the service window, his white chef's hat barely visible. Diego felt his legs go weak. His stomach twisted. His brain screamed at him to fix this, to say something, but his mouth wouldn't move. Then, Snoop raised a hand. A simple gesture. cutting off what was sure to be a desperate, stammering apology. You were saying something about legends? Diego's face went pale. His throat was so dry he could barely speak. I didn't know. I mean, I never imagined that the Snoop Dogg would. Dine alone? In jeans? Snoop finished the sentence for him, a faint smile playing on his lips as he adjusted his phone one last time. Diego's mind reeled. He wanted to disappear. The unconventional response. Out of nowhere, Sophia appeared beside him, practically materializing in desperation. Mr. Dogg, she began quickly, please accept our sincerest apologies. Diego is usually very professional, and he... Is he? Snoop interrupted, tilting his head. His voice wasn't angry. He wasn't offended. He sounded genuinely curious. Because in the past 2 hours, I've seen something very different. Fascinating, I must admit. Thomas finally mustered the courage to approach, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. Mr. Dogg, as the manager of Harmony Haven, I want to express our deepest. You know what's most interesting? Snoop interrupted again, this time turning back to Diego, completely ignoring Thomas's desperate attempts at damage control. Diego flinched. This is the first honest conversation I've had in weeks. Silence. No flattery. No hidden agendas. Just brutal honesty. Diego blinked. His brain was still buffering, struggling to understand. You're not angry? Snoop let out a small laugh, shaking his head. Oh, don't get me wrong. I've been recording every interaction, he said, tapping the phone on the table. But it's refreshing to meet someone who actually says what they think. Even if it's not very diplomatic. At the executives' table, one of them turned to his colleague, whispering. Classic Snoop. Turning a disaster into a social experiment. Chef Jules had fully abandoned the kitchen at this point, standing in the doorway, eyes wide, mustache twitching in excitement. Mon Dieu. He clutched his chest dramatically. I have Snoop Dogg critiquing my soufflé. The ultimate twist. Diego swallowed, his mind racing. Earlier, he had mocked Snoop's request for a soufflé, saying it was too sophisticated for his palate. Now, Snoop took another bite, chewing slowly before nodding in approval. Actually, it's delicious, he mused, setting his fork down. Then, with perfect comedic timing, he added, though, I must admit, ketchup would have been an interesting addition. Sophia let out an involuntary giggle before immediately covering her mouth, pretending to cough. Diego, on the other hand, felt the world spinning around him. His phone vibrated violently in his pocket. Probably his sister. Probably trying to warn him. Thomas took a deep breath. Mr. Dogg, please, allow us to make amends in some way. Dinner is on the house. But Snoop just grinned. And missed the pleasure of using my card? He reached into his wallet and pulled out the sleek black card Diego had seen earlier. After all those comments about my budget? That would be anticlimactic, don't you think? Diego swallowed. The sound of his name from Snoop Dogg's mouth made his skin crawl with second-hand embarrassment. Sir, he managed, about my comments, about your music, and, well, about you. Snoop raised an eyebrow. The ones about me being a celebrity playing the legend card? Diego nodded weakly. Snoop smirked. You're not the first to say it. Though most people don't say it to my face, while serving wine. At the executives' table, one of them casually started live streaming. They knew this moment would go viral within hours. Because this was quintessentially Snoop Dogg. The final question. Snoop leaned forward slightly, his tone shifting. Less amused. More intrigued. You know, he said, his eyes sharp, brutal honesty is a rare thing these days. Especially in my world. People are so busy saying the right thing. Not offending. Keeping up appearances. Diego shifted uncomfortably, realizing that every word, every gesture, was now being captured. Not just by Snoop's phone, but by multiple people in the restaurant. Then Snoop tilted his head, studying Diego like an interesting case study. Which brings me to a question. The room tensed. Why did you choose to be so direct with me tonight? The question caught Diego completely off guard. He had expected anger. Maybe even a threat of getting fired. Instead, Snoop wanted to understand. And Diego had no idea how to answer. From arrogance to opportunity, the night that changed everything. Diego expected anger, maybe even a lawsuit, but instead, he found himself in a surreal conversation about honesty. As he looked around at his coworkers' expectant faces and Snoop's amused expression, he finally admitted, "I guess I got tired of the pretense, of people coming here pretending to be something they're not, trying to impress. And when I saw you, I assumed you were just another celebrity doing the same." Snoop smirked. The irony is delicious, isn't it? Thunder rumbled in the distance as rain began softly tapping against the restaurant windows, adding to the tension. Diego exhaled. "For what it's worth, your French pronunciations really are terrible." Snoop burst into laughter, breaking the heavy atmosphere. Even Thomas, who had been near a full-blown panic attack all evening, allowed himself a small smile. Picking up his phone, Snoop mused, "You've given me the most authentic material I've recorded in months. The question is, what should I do with it?" Diego's heart stopped. This night could end in 1,000 different ways, many of them disastrous, but the expression on Snoop's face suggested something unexpected. A bigger picture. Snoop replayed a snippet from his recordings. "It's not just your comments about me, Diego. It's your perspective on music, inequality, creativity. You've got a voice that people don't usually hear." Sophia, regaining her composure, cautiously asked, "Mr. Dogg, why did you start recording in the first place?" "Instinct," Snoop admitted. "When Diego made that first comment about my budget, something told me this night would be educational." Nearby, an executive finally spoke up. "Mr. Dogg, this is exactly the kind of perspective the industry needs. Celebrities are in a bubble, we're disconnected from reality." Diego shifted uncomfortably. "I wasn't trying to be a sociological study." Snoop chuckled. "The best insights rarely are." Then, without warning, he changed the subject. "Tell me, how much does your mother's treatment cost?" Diego, caught off guard, hesitated. "Around $8,000 extra a month after insurance." "And your sister's college?" "Partial scholarship. I work double shifts to cover the rest." Chef Jules, who had been eavesdropping, finally stepped forward, setting down a plate of macarons. "Mon ami, I never knew." Diego sighed. "No one did. I don't want pity, just honesty. Even if it's sarcastic." Snoop grinned, playing another clip. "He probably has a revolutionary album in his garage. You know, Diego, the irony isn't lost on me. Considering my first album started in almost the same way. An unconventional offer." Thomas, still visibly nervous, tried again. "Mr. Dogg, I understand you find Diego's perspective interesting, but his behavior tonight was brutally honest?" Snoop interjected. "Absolutely. But also real. And reality is rare in my world." Diego caught his reflection in an empty wine glass. The arrogant waiter from earlier in the night had disappeared, replaced by someone more vulnerable, more authentic. "If I could go back," Diego started. Snoop cut him off. "Would you change anything? Would you be more flattering? More fake?" Diego thought for a moment. "No. I'd be more respectful, sure. But the frustration, the inequality, the disconnect between our worlds, that's real." Snoop nodded, as if Diego had just passed a test. "What if I told you these recordings could start a bigger conversation?" Diego frowned. "Bigger? Like what?" like a raw, unfiltered look at the gap between celebrity life and everyday reality. The conversation the entertainment industry needs. The executives leaned in, intrigued. Snoop continued. But first, let's talk practical matters, like your mother's treatment. Diego's heart skipped a beat. Mr. Dogg, I wasn't. I know, Snoop interrupted. That's what makes it genuine. You weren't asking for help. You were just being honest. Even if it bordered on insubordination. The rain outside had slowed, as if even nature was waiting to hear what would happen next. A life-changing decision. As the night stretched into early morning, not a single person had left. They were all waiting for Snoop's next move. Snoop tapped his phone. Before we move forward, I want to replay something specific. Diego's voice filled the room. In my position, people are usually fake. You treated me like any other customer, though not in the best way. Snoop looked at Diego. It's fascinating how people's behavior shifts when they know who I am. Investors, employees, even waiters, everyone has a mask. Thomas, sensing where this was going, cleared his throat. Mr. Dogg, once again, I'd like to express. Do you know how many people work directly under me at my label? Snoop interrupted. Diego blinked. Thousands? And do you know how many dare to tell me when I'm wrong? Sophia murmured, after tonight, probably one fewer. On the contrary, Snoop replied with a grin. Tonight made me realize something important. Snoop leaned forward. Diego, how long have you worked in the service industry? 15 years. 15 years of observing Hollywood's elite. Listening to their conversations. Watching their behavior. Seeing the disconnect between their grand visions and reality. The executives shifted uncomfortably. And in all that time, Snoop continued, you've developed a unique perspective, one that isn't afraid to call out contradictions. Even when it's uncomfortable. Diego swallowed hard. Mr. Dogg, are you saying? What would you say if I offered you a job? A glass shattered. Sophia had dropped the one she was holding. Diego stared. A job? Snoop nodded. At my label. On my communications team. Not for PR, not to polish messages, but to provide the raw, honest perspective you demonstrated tonight. Thomas nearly fainted. But he insulted you. Exactly, Snoop said. And in doing so, he told me more about how the world sees me than 6 months of market research ever could. Diego shook his head. I don't know anything about corporate communications. Perfect, Snoop replied. I don't need another polished executive. I need someone who understands the gap between celebrity life and reality. Someone who's lived that disconnect for 15 years. The executive scrambled to take notes. The salary, Snoop added, will be more than enough to cover your mother's treatment and your sister's education. Tears welled up in Diego's eyes. I don't know what to say. Say what you really think, Snoop said. Diego took a deep breath. Honestly? I think you're crazy. Laughter erupted in the restaurant. Snoop grinned. Probably. But that madness has taken me pretty far. So, what do you say? Diego hesitated, then finally smirked. On one condition. Snoop raised an eyebrow. What's that? That I stay honest. Even when it's uncomfortable. Snoop extended his hand. That's why I'm hiring you. They shook hands as the restaurant erupted in applause. From waiter to executive, Diego's most disastrous night had just become the best night of his life.